wanted to bring you up to date on what's happening in Gaza. Until recently, it seemed to slip off the headlines of most news outlets, but the last few weeks have been amongst the deadliest, with an ever-worsening humanitarian crisis. So to recap, the ceasefire that went into effect in January was supposed to stop the bloodshed after 15 months of intense war. It included hostage prisoner swaps, promises of more aid, and phased Israeli withdrawals. But in less than 2 months, it all unraveled. And there are two main developments since then. One is an Israeli blockade of Gaza, which has now slightly eased. The other, renewed military operations. So here's a quick summary. In early March, Israel cut off food, fuel, medicine, and other supplies going into Gaza. A week later, it shut off the electricity, which took the main desalination plant offline and meant over 500,000 people couldn't get clean water. The blockade plus damage sustained from renewed strikes also pushed Gaza's hospitals to the brink, including 2 of its main facilities. The Indonesian hospital in northern Gaza and the European hospital in the south are both out of service at the moment. The other major development since January is a new Israeli military campaign. Here are some of the key dates. On the 18th of March, Israel launched surprise airstrikes on what it said were Hamas targets, but it effectively ended the truce, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying Israel had resumed combat in full force. Gaza's health ministry said over 400 people were killed and hundreds of others injured by those strikes. Then in early May, Netanyahu declared the new offensive would be intensive and the Palestinian population would be moved for their own safety. Just a reminder, a forced relocation of a population can amount to a war crime under international law. A few days later, Israel launched ground operations in northern and southern Gaza. And in the last few days, Netanyahu says Israel will control the whole of Gaza to prevent Hamas's resurgence. Although analysts say that's hard to do because there will be pockets of resistance. So how's the world reacting? While the blockade drew condemnation from human rights groups, the UN and Doctors Without Borders warned that the blockade could amount to collective punishment, which is also a war crime. And over the past week, we've seen international pressure mounting. The UK, France, and Spain issued a joint statement asking Israel to stop military operations and allow more aid to go in or face concrete actions, they said. The UK also paused trade talks with Israel and sanctioned key West Bank settlers. And the EU says it's reviewing a pact that governs its ties with Israel. But what about the US, Israel's strongest ally? Although the Trump administration helped broker the January ceasefire, after taking office, President Trump floated the idea of turning Gaza into a Riviera and relocating its population. And that's a plan that was condemned not just by Palestinians, but its Arab neighbors and the international community. The White House also backed an $8.8 billion arms package to Israel. It also vetoed a UN resolution that demanded an immediate ceasefire because it wasn't linked to the release of hostages. Now, having said all of that, during a trip to the Gulf this month, Trump notably skipped Israel, which analysts say hints at frustration with Netanyahu, although no formal comments were made. But following that visit, there seemed to be a renewed push for mediators from the US, Qatar, and Egypt for a new ceasefire deal. So let's see. So how do Israelis feel? There are hardline elements that back Netanyahu's strategy, but we've seen months and months of hostage families protesting. These are some findings from some recent polls. The Israel Democracy Institute carried out a survey in April where 68% of Israelis say freeing the hostages should be the top priority versus 25% who say toppling Hamas should come first. And then there was a similar finding in a poll done by Israel's Channel 12, where 61% of Israelis want to end the war and see the hostages returned. Just 25% support expanding the fighting and occupying Gaza. And in April, nearly 1,000 Israeli reservists signed an open letter asking the government to prioritize freeing the remaining hostages, even if that meant ending the war. But amidst all of this, the humanitarian crisis grows more dire. The death toll in Gaza now is over 53,000 since the war began, and 90% of Gaza's residents have been displaced. This week, after nearly 3 months, Israel agreed to let limited aid into the Strip. On May 19th, less than 10 UN trucks started crossing into Gaza. There are more trucks coming in now. But for perspective, before the war, 500 trucks entered daily to meet Gaza's needs. A humanitarian chief called the current situation a drop in the ocean. He also made headlines saying 14,000 babies could die within 48 hours without a massive increase in aid. Although subsequently, there were clarifications saying that was more of an illustration rather than a precise model. So that's an update on what's been happening in Gaza since the ceasefire collapsed. Things are shifting by the hour. So if you're interested, I hope this helps you follow the headlines going forward. Sources in all stories, but especially this one, are really important. So I've put links in my YouTube description for all the sources I used for the facts and numbers that I mentioned. And as always, if you find this helpful, please like and subscribe my YouTube channel. The links are in all my bios. Your support helps me keep going. So thanks for that, and thanks for watching.